mid-90s made it seem as if Miami bass was potentially dead. What really ushered in a new era was when Dynamics 2 were commissioned to do a song for the Sunshine State of Mind compilation. This was a compilation of nothing but Floridian acts representing the new era of electronic music in Florida. And they contributed a song called Look to the Future. Pure, unadulterated, new school electro bass. And this really did point the way to the future, if the future had been the next 10 plus years. Around the same time, James Wolfe and Larry McCormick formed a group known as Resident Alien, and James Wolfe formed a record label known as Fragile Records, and really solidly ushered in what Dynamics 2 were already pointing towards. So it was pretty clear that if Florida Breaks had co-opted Miami bass, that New School Florida Electro built upon Miami bass. And this was 50% of what our present would become. The other 50% would be New School Hip Hop. Now, at this time, I have to take some credit here. This is when I became nostalgic, having not really taken a direct interest in Miami bass since 1993. In the year 2000, I became very nostalgic for Miami bass, and really, more importantly, I became aware that the innovations within Miami bass were overlooked critically. And over time, I also realized that the artists felt that they were overlooked commercially. I formed the Miami bass history movement initially by forming an E-group, which turned into a Yahoo group, and ultimately turned into more than I could have ever expected, with artists, with the actual fans, record collectors, industry insiders, all meeting under the umbrella and discussing exactly what did happen, and more importantly, what is happening. Now, Trick Daddy is certainly a figure to represent the future of Miami bass. Between he and Ted Lucas, they formed Slip and Slide Records. And Slip and Slide Records put out, of course, his own albums, Trick Daddy Dollars. The first was pretty notable. The real new school of top 40 hip-hop was ushered in almost single-handedly by a former Miami bass producer, Manny Fresh. Now, Manny Fresh isn't from South Florida. He's of course from New Orleans, representing New Orleans very, very deeply. But in 1986, Gregory D., a New Orleans rapper, was signed to Foresight Records. And in 1987, when Gregory D. teamed with Manny Fresh, they put out an album called Throwdown, which is pure, unadulterated, solid Miami bass. Sampling Miami samples, sampling Miami bass songs, rapping in the vein of Two Live Crew, and really making a perfect album. So if Manny Fresh was a former Miami bass producer, even going so far as doing songs such as VD Woman in 1989 on Gregory D's sophomore album. Well, Manny Fresh didn't disappear. He continued to produce and produce for Cash Money Records. And in 1998, Cash Money Records signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Universal Records. So they went major. And with Juvenile, they recorded Back That Ass Up. And that is, of course, a new school hip-hop staple that ushered in the overall sound of new school hip-hop. So you could certainly say that Miami bass was instrumental in the background of the current contemporary top 40 hip-hop sound. But within Miami itself, we had our own hero to do the same, Trick Daddy Dollars. Trick Daddy Dollars was originally in a group known as Manor Park Rangers on Breakaway Records. And he was also prominently featured in 1996 on Luke's Scarred. But when he partnered up with Ted Lucas, he and Ted Lucas founded Slip and Slide Records. Now, Slip and Slide Records was already finding their success, but they truly brought it home to Miami bass when they sampled Casey and the Sunshine Band and turned into Take It to the House. Take It to the House is definitely a Miami bass influenced record. It carries the torch and is a solid top 40 hip-hop hit. In the same vein, former Miami bass producer former Miami bass producer Luis Diaz, and his brother Hugo Diaz. They were working in the late 80s, early 90s with Danny Canary on World Premiere Records and Tone Deaf Records, producing groups such as Real Raw, and also working with Breezy Beat MC, and the first to feature DJ Lazaro Mendez, on record, if I'm correct. They came back. Luis Diaz was a producer that turned engineer, that then got some advice. He was engineering groups such as the Rolling Stones and Wyclef, big accounts at Circle House Studios, and they gave him advice. Find someone young, groom them, produce them, and they did. He and his brother Hugo found Pitbull, and of course got Pitbull signed to TBT Records and has become one of the most successful contemporary top 40 hip-hop rappers in this day and age. And again, this is built on the back of Miami bass history.